Audrey's here. Gear video number 2. Here we go.
All right, so I carried this up top. I had an extra string, earplugs, which I never used. So, yes, I stayed in a few shelters, but snoring is snoring. You get used to it. So I had a penknife made for me by my brother-in-law, Ken. It cut my cheese. It opened packages. I never had to use it for self-defense, but I guess I could. It ain't much, but I guess I could. And the thing I lost on trail, my prescription eyeglasses. So, lost them in the snow, could not find them on Tray Mountain. That's the way it goes. So I ended up buying what I call cheaters, and the only reason I carry them is when I edit my videos, it just helps me see a little bit better. So, side pockets. You know what, I tended not to put food in here for 2 reasons. I didn't want the mice in here burrowing holes in my pockets. And when I hung my bear bag, I hung this, and my food bag with it. So all the food stayed hanging in the tree and was not on me. All right, this is my stove. It's a pocket rocket. Eyeglasses. More hand sanitizer. A clip for my bottles on my trekking poles, which I don't have out here, I'm sorry. This is a bottle thing that goes on a smart water bottle that you can actually spray yourself and take a small shower if you want to. Really didn't need it because I was in the winter, but I'm sure this summer that's going to come in handy. Toothbrush, toothpaste, toenail clippers, and I had a little bit of a stomach problem, so I have some Pepto-Bismol here, but it didn't really help me. And I had a backup red light if I needed it to see. Never used it. Not that heavy, not a big problem. The other pouch. All right, so I had to leave Imodium AD, just some pills, some vitamins, some throat lozenges, and just things that you think you're gonna need that if I had pain, I took a leave. Probably did, in the 6 weeks, I may have taken 20. Not that many, really. I thought I did pretty well. And so this was on my strap. It hung here. It was my face wash. When I sweated, I wanted stuff out of my face. This thing works good. The problem is I had to remember to wash it whenever I went into town. Sometimes I forgot to, and then I hated to use it again because it didn't smell that good. I had a compass. I don't know. Trail's marked pretty well. And I suppose if I got off trail and got lost, this thing would come in handy, but it'd stay in case I needed it. And I had a Garmin temp gauge that would send the temperature to my watch, which is a Phoenix 5, and tell me when I was laying in my hammock how cold it was outside, so I could think about what I needed for the day. So that's everything on the outside. This video may run long, and my plan is, if it's over 15 minutes, I'm just going to make it 2 videos so that it won't be completely boring. So pack, Hyperlite, worked great. Sorry, it is not waterproof. So I had water in the bottom a few times when I wasn't putting my poncho over it, and I had a few items that got wet. So, but I back everything up with Dyneema and Ziploc bags, and so the stuff that didn't need to get wet, shouldn't get wet, did not get wet. So Gossamer Gear 1/4-inch pad. Basically, this is what went under my hammock, and when I stepped out of it in my stocking feet, this is what I stood on. I put my water underneath this at night. It did not freeze when I did that. If I left the water on top and it was cold enough, the water would freeze. I also put my shoes underneath it, and kept a few items sitting here while I was in my hammock. The other way that I use this, if I slept in a shelter, I would put this down first, and then I would put my pad on top of it. This stuff sticks pretty good, so the pad didn't slide around inside the shelter. Doesn't weigh very much at all. Food bag, Z-Packs. Got some reflective on it. Never had a problem finding it at night. The only problem I had with this thing, I put too much food in it. At one time, it weighed 15 pounds. Way too much food. And now that I've done 6 weeks, 471 miles, I got a pretty good idea what I need to do. And I was getting better at it, for sure, and not carrying all that extra weight. By the way, the whole pack weighed, with everything in it, weighed 34 pounds. I have 4 days of food in there. So this is a snakeskin with a Dyneema tarp. It's a 12-foot tarp. It's got Dutch wear bling on it, what they call, it's just a way to hook things up without tying knots. This thing worked awesome except one time. Over Mountain Shelter. We decided to stay there. What a beautiful spot. I found 2 trees on the edge. I hung my tarp up, got my hammock up, got in it. It was just awesome. Then all of a sudden, what did you hear? The wind started blowing wicked, and you could hear it coming. And it pulled my stakes 3 different times where I had to get out of the tarp, redo my stakes, but the stakes would never hold, ever. Fortunately, I was worried that if the rain came, I had no protection. But we had no rain that night, just wind. So it taught me a lesson. I cannot put this thing up where it's wind prone. But my change, when I go back, I will buy 4 extra long stakes for the corners, just to see if they bite more if we're gonna have high wind. Other than that, it's worked fairly well. The snakeskin has ripped a couple times, but it's a great Dyneema tarp that keeps me dry. So, Hyperlite makes pods that are made out of Dyneema. They keep me organized. They keep me waterproof. So that's what these are. But this is my tarp, excuse me, this is my hammock. Inside of this thing, I keep the hammock and the tree straps that go with it. So again, no knots, none at all. So on there I have a carabiner. This thing folds around, hooks inside, goes around the tree at the right height. And I'm trying to remember the name of this. Oh, it's called the Beetle, I believe. And this is what the hammock actually hooks to when I set it up. And I will do a hammock review, but I'm not going to include it in this. So each of my pods are set up a certain way so that I know, like this one right here stays right close to the top, because I told you I wore my wind jacket and these 2 short shirts most of the time. But when it really got cold and I was hiking and we had a hard wind and it was rainy and cold, what I would do, I would take my Patagonia waffle shirt and I would put it on over this, and then I would put this back on again. And this is what kept me warm. So that's the most warmth that I needed the whole time I was there, and I hiked in 20-degree weather. with wind chill in the teens or maybe even lower at times. So it worked well. The only other thing that I wore twice, I had Patagonia base layer that I put on underneath my hiking pants. I only wore them twice. It only was cold enough for me to do that, and even then, I probably sweated too much. So this is what I went to stay warm when I had to. So I had a pair of wind pants, which don't weigh, they weigh less than 3 ounces. But since I bought the rain gear pants, I did not wear these very often at all. So most likely, these will stay when I go back out again. So that was all in one pod. The other pod was basically things that I would not wear while I was hiking. And that is my puffy jacket and my my booties. I wear these at night in the hammock. 5 nights I probably wore these. It was cold enough. For the rest of the time I didn't really need them, but boy, they worked awesome. This thing, if I got into camp and got my wet clothes off, I would put this on to stay warm. And I slept in it a few times. I would never ever wear it hiking, ever. Because I needed this warmth in case something went wrong, that it would keep me alive. Extra pair of socks, extra pair of underwear. Now here is the reason, I mean, all this is set up for winter gear. So when I go back, a lot of this stuff is going to get exchanged out. And here's 2 things that's going to get exchanged out. Because I'm sleeping in a hammock, I need an underquilt. It's made by Hammock Gear. It's called the Incubator. It's a 10-degree quilt. I'm telling you, I never, ever got cold. Once I got warm, took me an hour sometimes, but once I got warm, I was like toasting this thing. It's awesome, but going back, when I go back, the weather is gonna be much warmer. I don't believe I need this. I have another underquilt that's lighter by 10 ounces, and it'll save me some weight, and I won't need this. Maybe, depends on how late I get north in New England, I may need to take that back. But the Incubator, 10-degree underquilt, awesome. Awesome company too. I keep it in a contractor bag because that thing cannot get wet under no circumstance.